had to be ransomed. So the logic of war leads to violence, suffering, death, killing, ignorance. The logic of peace can lead to life, the flourishing of life for all of us, whatever our religion, whatever our nationality, whatever our language. And that's what I'm trying to do. And many great Franciscan philosophers were great at logic. And I explain in the text Duns Scotus, who was a Franciscan, and John Peckham, or Peckham as he's sometimes called, who was another Franciscan. He became a teacher at Oxford and Paris universities, 1200s. And he was from Patcham, outside Brighton, just near where my daughter's buried. And we did a eulogy and service for her at her funeral in the little church in Clayton, that's just close to Patcham, where this great Franciscan theologian came from. He would have gone to that church as a young man. And these Franciscan thinkers, Duns Scotus and him and others, many others, Raymond Lull, who I talked about a lot in the Logic of Peace, they all wanted to use logic for peace achievement. And I'm carrying on with that work. I nearly became a Franciscan earlier in my 20s, and then decided to, instead of being a monk like a Buddhist or a Franciscan, to be a householder and an academic and have a family. But I don't, I still honour the Franciscan tradition. And so I want to talk also a little bit more about how can we apply the logic of peace. So I've talked about what the logic of peace is. Why should we bother? What's so important about this? Well, think about it. The logic of war is what's led to this unsufferable conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which is, we're pouring money into it, endless money, millions going into it, and nothing good can come out of all this. People are dying. The same with the Gaza, Israel, Palestine war. Again, vast fortunes are going in, and people are dying, and traumatized, and mass killings. That's where the logic of war is leading us. And there are other places around the planet, like in Yemen, but also in Congo and in Sudan and elsewhere. So what we need to do is to work out how the logic of peace works and then apply it to these conflict zones. Work with intellectuals from each of those cultures and say, look, hey, let's work on a blueprint. Let's find a logical peace to solve the problem of Ukraine, Russia and their competing narratives, or to solve the problem of Palestine, Israel and their competing narratives. I believe it can be done and must be done. And likewise, Pakistan and India, there's still friction there. There's still, water wars going on as people claim the Indians have flooded Pakistan by deliberate intention. I don't think that's true, but a lot of people think that. And so, again, apply logic to Pakistan-India relations over Kashmir. And then also in our personal lives. Life is not easy. We have conflicts. We have family quarrels. That's my book on the tragic death of my daughter reveals. We have bullying, even within families. Well, so we need to apply peace logic to all that. What's one way of thinking about this is to say, like Parmenides did, we're looking for the goddess of wisdom. We're on a journey, each one of us in incarnation, looking for the goddess of wisdom on it. And we could say we're looking for the pure ideas, like truth. That's what Parmenides said is the goal of logic, is to find truth. I used to have arguments with my mother, who was a Marxist, who said from early age, when I asked about what is truth, she said, no, I don't believe in absolute truth. She was a relativist, like a good Marxist. Well, I beg to disagree with her. We can have that conversation later on in the Heavenly Library, but I think I'm more with Parmenides and Plato. There is an absolute truth, and we can call that God or spirit, or whatever language you want to use, the Tao, the Buddha nature. But that's that's what the logic of peace is about, is to find that. We also want to find justice, another very important concept. So how can you apply justice to Palestine, Israel? They both have claims and arguments, but where does justice actually stand on all this? What about in the quarrels between Ukraine and Russia? They both appeal to justice. Well, the logic of peace has to work out where is the actual justice here. And that's where we have to work with international legal thinkers, philosophers of law, people that specialise in legal logic. What's going on in America is a crazy dismantling of the Constitution. Where's justice in all that? Is it right and just that the Supreme Court can be essentially bought by a president and then it can just give him blanket freedom to do what he wants? I mean, obviously that's not just. So how does the logic of peace then, work that out? What would be justice for Trump? I mean, he's a convicted felon. He's deceitful and dishonest and megalomaniac. And so what would be justice for him, and how could it be enforced? The logic of peace would be about those kind of difficult questions, but they're necessary to ask. What is virtue? How can we cultivate the virtues? Socially, civic virtues, but also personally, individually. The logic of peace would ask for that, because when you do pursue virtue ethics, which is Aristotle's term, then inner peace follows. So, and what is goodness? These are all the fundamental questions that peace logic has to ask, I think. So just coming to the end, just to say, I've just had a very good meeting yesterday of the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum. I won't rehearse everything we talked about, but we talked about the assassination of the Kennedy brothers, who I think were very intellectual, very wise people, JFK and RFK, tragically killed before their time. I actually think the Vatican would be wise to declare them saints or begin that process. They were Catholics, they had a liberal universalism at the core of their commitment to social values and peace, and they were assassinated by forces, dark forces, who didn't want that to prevail. And I've explained that in my book, based on the work of a man called Ken McCarthy, who has written a recent book about their struggles with Zionism and how militant Zionism seems to have been behind the assassinations of those two, because they wanted Israel to have the nuclear bomb, and the Kennedys were in the way, which is utterly tragic. But anyway, read Ken McCarthy's book on this. Part of peace logic is exploring deep history, finding out the truth behind historical events, not the cover-ups, but the actual facts behind what was going on. That's our duty as scholars and philosophers and historians. Likewise, peace logic is needed to apply to climate change and climate action. And we discussed that yesterday in the call. There is a flotilla of aid going towards Gaza, setting off today, 31st of August, from Barcelona in Italy, and 44 ships, 50 vessels are already there from 44 nations. What's going to happen when they reach Gaza in 2 weeks' time? Well, I hope they're allowed through. I hope Israel doesn't try and stop them all. I think Turkey should send in a protection fleet and ensure that they get to land and can distribute the aid they've got for the people of Gaza. In international law, they have the right to do that. Israel doesn't have the right to stop it and block it. But in the real world, how do we prevent genocides happening? That's a question for peace logic to discuss. So, on that thought, I'm going to do 199 Names of Peace only to finish, because with my daughter we dreamt up this project of the 99 Names of Peace, and they're all important, and the languages are important. And today we have Yes. So, in this project, we have the idea of the peace ship, which was a project number 76 that I dreamt up. It's sort of come true. There are a few peace ships around, and in a sense this flotilla that's set off is a peace ship project, which is that there should be peace ships available to go and moor off dispute areas and mediate. So I suggested that the Royal Navy should convert one of its huge battleships to being a peace ship, and then it could park off Gaza, and you could have the representative leaders of the different rival teams to come on board. So you'd have Hamas and IDF leaders and stuff. So that's the project. And I think it's still very important and very necessary. It would be like a floating mediation service on the seas. And I'd love it if the British Navy would organise that. It could be moored, at Greenwich or somewhere. But that's the project. And then the language that goes with that is Tahitan. The word for peace is Hau, H-A-U. Tahiti is a little set of islands. It's a Polynesian language on the Society Islands of French Polynesia. And I go into the history of the language and the rich culture of the Polynesian peoples, including the Maori of New Zealand. And I talk about the religion and the spirituality of the Tahiti people. The Tahiti chief is a peacekeeper, and although they were quite warlike, their real goal is to achieve peace for their people, their community. So I talk about all that, and I give the words for mediation, conflict resolution, reconciliation, rectification. Reconciliation in Tahiti is Fataraha Paraha. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Like waves coming in off the Pacific. Fataraha Paraha. That's what we need, reconciliation. So the idea of and wisdom, by the way, is Ma'a in Tahiti. Ma'a, which is very much like Ma'at in ancient Egyptian. I wonder if there's an etymological connection. Very possibly. So the Global Peace Ship and Tahiti is today's project. And also the word for the Holy Spirit, holy, is the same, is Mo'a. Mo'a. So wisdom is Ma'a, and holy is Mo'a. And Holy Spirit is Te Varua Mo'a. That's the Tahiti word in the translation of the Bible of the Holy Spirit. It sounds like it. Te Varua Mo'a. And knowledge is Ma'atai. That's interesting, given my Kabbalah runes, where I talk about the T sounds are often like when something concretizes and becomes definite. So Ma'a is wisdom, but Ma'atai is knowledge. It's when the wisdom becomes concretized. Philosophy is both. It's the logic of peace is about concrete knowledge, how to operate this machine, how to make that software program work, how to, do anything, with this case in this court about that crime. But it's also about wisdom in general, Ma'a. It's about that spiritual level of universal consciousness. And peace logic is about navigating between the two, I think. Anyway, look, thank you very much. It's been a rich feast. My cat seems to have enjoyed it. Bishy, she's a great lover of philosophy in her own way. So thank you for coming. And maybe we'll finish with a poem, because we like poems here. And poems keep us nourished in the soul. And after all, Parmenides was a poet. So here's a poem I wrote in 2001. So this is back to the horrible events of that year. It's called Collisions. Too often our islands collide in geotechnic displacements. Mountains and clouds and auras attacking each one another. Where we passed, a warm prescience shades over grey, dusk colours after rain, leaving the regret of not having followed through, and the too great burden of accumulated dreams, unaccomplished, to fulfil. Whispers of love mirrored on and through our curtained walls of heart, where all 10 categories get broken down finally by the Red River. I'll leave it there. Right.